Hello again, my DIY loving friends. I'm Sarah, and this is Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. Today, we're turning Dollar Tree finds into designer dreams. Let's create a 5-star designer look without breaking the bank. So what are we waiting for? Let's go DIY together. For this DIY, I've got 2 of these white floating shelves from Dollar Tree. I removed the plastic wrap from both of them, and they have this little ledge on both sides of the bottom, which we're gonna need to remove. I'm gonna use this hot knife that I got on Amazon, and I will link it for you below, to sort of slice those little protruding edges off on both ends of both of my shelves, as you see me doing right here. Once those protruding edges are gone, I use a tiny screwdriver to remove the screws and the metal plates from both ends of both of my shelves as well. I use some Starbond super glue gel, which I will link for you below, to attach the 2 shelves to one another to make a solid square, and I allow it to dry. You can also use the super glue from Dollar Tree to do this if you'd prefer. Next, I'm using this DAP Drydex spackle, and I'll link it below, but Dollar Tree does carry spackle that will work for this too. The Drydex goes on pink and turns white when it's dry. I fill in the seam where the 2 shelves are connected using the spackle, filling it in on the bottom and then on the sides, and then finally on the top, doing my best to keep the surface clean, flat, and smooth. I use my finger and a wet wipe to clean the excess spackle away before it dries. Once my spackle is totally dry, I grab this folk art acrylic paint in the color Butter Pecan, which I will link for you below. And I am going to paint this entire piece using this beige tone paint in an effort to give it a faux wood look. I start with painting the entire top and edges, doing 2 to 3 coats of the paint. I also paint the sides of the piece the same way. I didn't paint the bottom because it won't be seen in the finished project. Next, I grab some folk art antique wax, which I will link for you below, and a small dry brush, and I start distressed painting the piece, beginning with all the indented edges around the sides, and then distressing the top and bottom edges, working my way to the flat areas on the sides of the square piece, and ending up at the top flat surface of the square. And at that point, I switch to a larger chip brush to distress paint that top flat surface with the antique wax as well, until that whole thing starts to take on an antiqued wood look. And then I set it aside to dry. I have 4 of these large wooden people. I got a pack of them on Amazon, and I'll link them for you below. I want them to match the 2 shelves that we connected and painted, so I'm using the same Butter Pecan paint as a base over all 4 of the wood people, followed by a distress painting of antique wax over that Butter Pecan base, so that the 2 parts of the project will then match. Lastly, I use some E6000 glue to attach my painted wood people legs to the bottom of my 2 shelf square. And this is my faux wood riser, made from plastic Dollar Tree floating shelves, and I cannot emphasize how much I love the elegant architecture of this riser. And I have been dying to DIY 2 of these shelves together just like this since the first time I saw them at Dollar Tree. I love this, and I think it is so high-end and upscale looking. Truly a winning DIY. For this DIY, I am using a total of 90 Tumbling Tower Blocks from Dollar Tree to complete this project. I've assembled all my blocks into a herringbone pattern, as you see here, and you can always pause the video to really study the pattern. I'm using an 8x10 rectangle as a template that I drew with pencil under my assembled blocks to create an overall basic rectangular shape. The first thing I'm doing is to glue my herringbone pattern together, as you see me doing right here. I am using some super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, and I'm doing this in rows. to keep the pattern in the rectangle shape that I want. And you can pause or replay the video at any point if you need to see something more than once. Once the glue was totally dry, I used a Dollar Tree canvas placed on top of the blocks to trace straight lines and create a rectangle to cut out. And because, as you all know, I have an irrational fear of power tools, I asked Mr. Medicated to use his circular blade saw to cut out the lines, which he so kindly did. I sanded the edges of the rectangle with a sanding block, and I grabbed some Minwax wood filler, which I will link for you below, and used it to fill in some of the larger gaps in my block pattern to give it a smoother look. And then I let that filler totally dry. Off camera, I sanded the excess filler off the blocks and wiped the dust away, and I also used my clippers to cut a large wood ring, which I will link for you below, into 2 half-moon shapes. I also grabbed 4 tiny wood rings I had in my stash, which I will link for you below, as well as 4 large half-rounds and a handful of wood craft sticks from Dollar Tree. And using a mixture of water and antique wax, I painted the tumbling tower block rectangle on the top and the sides, as well as the 4 wood half rounds, the 2 half-moon wood rings, the 4 tiny wood rings, and a bunch of the wood craft sticks with the same wax and water mixture. When the water and the antique wax dried, I realized I wanted to really emphasize the herringbone pattern of the blocks even more. So, using a thin brush and some folk art camel color paint, which I will link for you below, I painted over the seams between the blocks, kind of creating almost like grout lines to really make that pattern pop. And because I really didn't like the way the edges of my block rectangle looked, I decided to cover them with the wood craft sticks on those edges. So I trimmed the sticks to frame in the whole block rectangle, and I used some super glue wood glue to attach them to all 4 sides of the block rectangle. I turned the rectangle over, and using some loose tumbling tower blocks as spacers, I glued the 4 half rounds I had painted to the 4 corners of the rectangle to give it just a little bit of height. Back onto the front side of the tray, on one end, I set up 3 spacer blocks on each corner, just like you see here, and I used some E6000 glue on my 2 mini wood rings and placed them in front of the 2 corner spacers so that they are evenly placed in the middle of that end of the tray. I used some more E6000 on the cut ends of the half moon large wood ring and place each cut end in the middle of a tiny wood ring, as you see me doing right here. Then I move all the spacer blocks to the opposite end of the tray and repeat that for the second tray handle that we've created. And this is my tumbling tower block herringbone tray, and I absolutely love this tray. Everything about it says high end. I love the textured pattern, I love the different wood tones, and I even love the unique tray handles. And although these handles are for the most part decorative, they are fairly strong because we use the E6000 to attach them. This tray works beautifully as part of a table centerpiece or on its own, a truly high-end DIY. For this DIY, we're beginning with 2 of these glass tea light holders that come in a pack of 3 or 4 from Dollar Tree, as well as 2 of these glass candle holders that are a staple at Dollar Tree. I'm going to paint the tea light holders using this Rust-Oleum paint and primer in glossy black, which I'll link for you below, and I'm painting the candle holders using Rust-Oleum paint and primer in glossy white, which I will also link for you below. Once my candle holders dry, using some apple barrel black paint and a tiny brush, I paint every other long strip in the middle, as you see here, so that they are alternating black and white, doing my best to paint straight and evenly and to stay in the lines, which is not my forte. I've got some shaky hands because I'm kind of old. The struggle is real, but I do my best. I repeat that on the second candle holder as well. First, I used a pencil and then a thin Sharpie marker to freehand some diamond shapes above the black and white painted stripes. Also, freehanding shapes, not my forte, due to those shaky hands I told you about, but I did just okay with this as well. Then I filled in the diamond shapes that I had outlined with some black paint and a tiny brush on both of my candle holders. At the bottom of the candle holder, I created a checkerboard pattern in pencil and began outlining the black squares with a regular Sharpie marker. And at some point, I thought to myself, hey, why not just fill in all the black squares with the Sharpie instead of paint? It'll be so much easier. And it definitely is. However, that does cause a problem for me later on, as you will see later in the video. I also used that marker to fill in and fix up some of the black stripes and the black diamonds, but again, this does cause an issue later. To help clean up the lines between colors, I decided to use some of this 1/8 of an inch metallic gold striping tape, which I will link for you below. So using an X-Acto knife to trim it, I began by placing pieces of tape between my white and black long stripes going down the sides of the candle holders. And once the vertical stripes were covered, I moved on to the horizontal white space between the stripes and the checkerboard, covering that space by wrapping the tape around it about 3 times until the width of that space was fully covered with gold tape. I used one piece of tape to cover the bottom edge of the candle holder, and then I moved on to the space between the stripes and the diamonds, wrapping the gold tape around there too. Lastly, I wrapped the edge above the diamonds up at the top of the candle holder. I repeated that exact same wrapping with the gold tape on the second painted candlestick holder in the exact same way. Then I started on the tea light holders, and I decided to add some of these small wood half rounds, which I will link for you below, and I attached 24 of them to a piece of packing tape and took them outside to spray them with the same glossy black paint I used on the tea light holders. Meanwhile, back on the candle holders, I'm using Minwax Polycrylic Clear Gloss, which I will link for you below, all over the candle holders to give them a beautiful high gloss shine and to fully seal them. And here is where that problem with the Sharpie marker came in, because the polycrylic did make some of that marker run with some grayish bluish streaks, just a little bit, but I kind of went with it because it still looked pretty good to me. I did that same polycrylic gloss on both of those candle holders. I used some more of that same gold tape from before to accent the top and the bottom edges of my 2 black tea light holders. Once my black half rounds were dry, I used some hot glue to attach 12 of them to each of my black tea light holders, placed a little above the middle, going in a line around the tea light holder, just to give a little black tone-on-tone texture to the small tea lights. And off camera, I used the polycrylic glossy sealer on those two tea light holders as well. And these are my Mackenzie Childs inspired candle holders. Now, I didn't actually attach the black tea lights to the top because I kind of liked that white candle holder alone even better, but you could always attach them if you prefer. If you love the black and white patterned look of Mackenzie Childs, then this DIY is definitely for you. Thanks for joining me on this budget-friendly decor adventure. If you love these Dollar Tree transformations, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Medicated Housewife DIYs. Let me know in the comments which DIY was your favorite and why. You know I love hearing from all of you. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, remember that together we're making the world a more beautiful place, one DIY at a time.